This is hashtag history episode 149. I'm
Whew.
Rachel.
And I'm Leah. Wowza.
I know. And this week we are talking about a time in history where the United States, Great Britain, France, and the then Soviet Union carried out together a series of trials against Nazis for the war crimes they committed over the course of the Second World War. This series of 13 trials was held in Nuremberg, Germany between the years of 1945 and 1949, resulting in the convictions of 161 people. These trials created a precedent, as this was the first time in history in which an international criminal trial was established to hold people who had committed war crimes accountable. War is war, so we will talk later about what exactly constitutes as war crimes. But for the sake of keeping things brief in the introduction, just know that what Hitler and by extension his Nazi regime in Germany did during World War II was some of the most disgusting and heinous war crimes the world had ever seen. In addition to invading multiple countries such as Poland, France, Denmark, Belgium, the Soviet Union, and more, Nazi Germany also murdered more than 6 million European Jews in a systematic genocide. This was unacceptable, and the officials in charge of such violence were held accountable during the lengthy Nuremberg trials. So, let's get into it.
Remix.
I'm Rachel,
And I'm Leah.
and this is hashtag history,
The podcast for both history nerds and history haters alike.
where we dive into history's greatest stories of controversy, conspiracy, and corruption.
Okay, talk as fast as you can because I want to drink this immediately.
Right. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Back on task here. Thanks, Sam. Moving on.
Okay, bye.
Just kidding. I thought I would take this opportunity to actually remind listeners that they can sponsor our cocktails for our episodes.
Yes.
This entire season was sponsored by a single person, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Samantha.
Yeah, but like future seasons and future drinks are still up for grabs to sponsor. So be sure to do that if you are so inclined by clicking the link on our Instagram page.
Yes. We would love that so much. We amazingly, since we introduced the cocktail sponsorship program, I don't even know how many years ago now, maybe like 2 to 3 years ago, every single cocktail in that length of time has been sponsored, which is just really remarkable. But there are no sponsors yet for the upcoming season. So definitely, if you are interested in sponsoring a cocktail, you, like Leah just said, you do not have to sponsor an entire season. My sister, like me, is an overachiever.
It's a family trait.
It's a family trait, certainly. It is only $5 to sponsor one cocktail, and you always get a shout out here during the episode and on our Instagram when we post the cocktail. So definitely, if you are interested, we would love that so much if you would sponsor a cocktail in the upcoming season.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. This week's cocktail is very simply a German mule.
Yay.
I thought it appropriate to do a drink based on the grander location of this week's topic instead of some of the darker aspects I'm sure we'll be diving into very shortly, which is how we came to the German mule.
Yeah.
So the German mule consists of a shot of Jaeger. Yay! Yay, Jaeger. Lemon juice. And then you top that with ginger beer and then optional garnish mint leaves. I also like to kind of muddle a little bit of mint leaves in mine.
I did too.
Okay.
Well, to be fair, I did not muddle. I
Ripped them apart in your hands.
ripped them apart with my fingers. Correct.
Okay.
And just strewn them about. So partway through the recording, please do let me know if I have green in my teeth.
Can do. All right, that's it. I don't have a ton of history for this one. It's just a simple mule, but cheers and let me know your thoughts.
Cheers. Yay. As much as you and I both love mules, and we've had several mules on the podcast, I can't say that we have had a German, we haven't had a German mule.
No.
Yeah.
This is new for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is just disgusting and I hate it. And by that, I mean a 10.
Yep.
This
That's
gets a
a
rating of a
10.
10.
That's a 10.
It's so good.
It's so good.
I have nothing bad to say. It's like when I can't think of a good analogy. When you think the best is the best because you haven't met the best,
Mm,
that's how this
mm,
feels. Is like
mm.
because I've had a mule with bourbon before,
Vodka.
I know that that is better.
Right.
But if this was the only mule I ever had for the rest of my life and I had never tasted another one,
You'd be happy.
I'd be
Right.
delighted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jaeger, like you can absolutely taste it. But
Uh-huh.
the thing with mules is really the number one thing, the thing that you're left with is that ginger beer.
Yeah, you're drinking ginger beer.
Yes.
I was trying to like it's
It's like 90% ginger beer, 10% a couple other things.
yes, that you can't taste because the ginger is so overwhelming. So why not just
Right.
drink ginger beer instead of getting sloshed? But,
If you don't like ginger beer, probably not for you.
mm-mm.
Mules in general.
Definitely not since 90% of it is ginger.
Right. But I'm one of those weirdos. Tell me, I don't
Mm.
do you go to sushi?
No.
Okay. When we go to sushi, and I haven't in like a year and a half, but
Hmm.
when we go to sushi, the garnish on the side is like pickled
Mm.
ginger, and I literally will eat the entire thing of pickled ginger myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right. Well, my drink is basically gone.
Wow. Well,
Almost.
I have the whole episode to finish mine, so
What was your rating also a 10? Okay, stupid
obviously.
question.
Stupid.
Stupid. Okay. There's kind of two paths that I can go down right now with background. One is a brief background on World War II and how we ended up here. The other is a background on what war crimes are. For no particular reason whatsoever, I have been doing a lot of research about Hitler lately and how he was able to seize power and manipulate millions of people with harmful propaganda and cult-like tactics.
What? What?
So let's start there with background on Hitler and World War II.
Okay.
Let me just pull it out of a recent text message that I sent to someone, JK. Because this isn't an episode dedicated entirely to Hitler and his rise to power, nor is it an episode about World War II, I do have to keep this background brief. But as we all know, Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany in January of 1933. And with this, Hitler took Germany from a democracy to a dictatorship. I think it's worth noting here that while many Germans were in agreement with Hitler's leadership, many Germans were also rather apathetic to it initially. Germany had been through waves of political turmoil for decades following the First World War and arguably before. So many Germans kind of cast a blind eye to the new party in power, as according to AnneFrank.org said, quote, they had seen many governments come and go and did not expect the new government to last any time at all, unquote.
That's a really good point. Is like it's not just after World War One. It's like Germany. I'm trying to think of like between going from like a monarchy to
Yeah.
this in relatively short period of time has
Mhm.
probably saw so much change in their politics and government that I mean I understand that.
Uh-huh. And even Germany had only become a democracy in 1918 after the November Revolution. So it hadn't been a democracy for particularly long before this, even. So, to your point, their structure of government had changed so frequently that many people kind of didn't take it seriously. But the reason I bring this up is obviously because of the moment we're in now, that like your vote does matter
Hmm.
and your informed vote matters. Because even if you think it's a temporary situation, they can leave lasting impacts.
For sure.
But of course, we know that this would not be the case, that, the government would not last for any time at all. Like I already mentioned, what was once a democracy was replaced with a dictatorship following the issuance of the Reichstag fire decree, issued only 1 month after Hitler came to power, which took away several rights from the German people, such as their freedom of speech, press, and assembly. What was that look for?
Nothing. What?
Further, it expanded the government's reach, allowing the government to arrest any political opponent without charge, to suppress news publications, dissolve opposing political organizations. I almost can't get through this without looking at your face and laughing. And overall, get rid of state and local laws or governments that did not comply with the Nazi Party's orders.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that I'm having to avoid eye contact with Leah throughout this entire thing because she's going to make me laugh with her very, very knowing face.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm my voice is silent. My face Might not be.
Just 1 month after that, Hitler issued the Enabling Act, a truly terrifying piece of legislation that essentially stated that whatever Hitler says goes. If what Hitler did violated Germany's constitution, then it was the constitution that was wrong. Hitler could decree anything without approval of parliament. No checks and no balances, ushering in a full-on dictatorship, one that was supposed to end in 4 years, but got extended in 1937, 1939, and 1943. So again, a friendly reminder that your educated and informed vote matters. I kind of have goosebumps. With all of this unchecked balance and surrounded by yes men who were desperate for proximity to power, the first concentration camp established by the Nazi government was constructed in March of 1933. That is just 2 months after Hitler came to power. This concentration camp, Dachau, which I have visited, would end up serving as the standard and the model for the more than a dozen eventual concentration camps. What started with the imprisonment of primarily political opponents of the Nazi regime evolved into the imprisonment of European Jews who were held at these camps on the strict basis of being Jews. It is estimated that more than 32,000 people died at Dachau alone. They died of an array of atrocities. For one, the horrifically poor sanitation that existed there. Many of these barracks did not have facilities for prisoners to relieve themselves, and even those that did not allow prisoners to leave the barracks at nighttime to do so. In these cases, buckets were used inside the barracks, leading to a constant horrendous smell and disease. Fleas and lice and rats were common in these quarters, and with many concentration camps being so packed that those imprisoned had to sleep on their sides, they couldn't roll over or lay flat because they were that packed in there, these types of contagious diseases spread at a rapid pace. There also was insufficient heating in the winter and no air conditioning in the summer, leading to more illness. Beyond that, the nutrition in these camps was meager. Prisoners were given 3 meals a day, but those meals included things like massively watered down coffee, soup, black bread, and tiny amounts of sausage or cheese. The severe lack of nutrients and calories meant that people quite literally withered away. Their bodies ate at any fat storage they had. Then it would eat at the muscles and then eventually the organs. Combine this with the forced labor subjected upon these people in which they were worked to death. Other prisoners were subjected to heinous medical experiments in which they were purposefully forced to undergo hypothermia or purposefully infected with malaria or tuberculosis, all so that they could become a case study. It's fucking horrific, but that's the point. That's why the Nuremberg Trials happened, because what happened between the years of 1933 and 1945 should never, ever happen again. Mass genocide is deplorable and something that we cannot turn a blind eye to. The Nuremberg Trials told the world that we would not. With the Nuremberg Trials, we told the world that the Holocaust would never happen again because we would never forget. This is where war crimes come into play. War itself is permitted under the law of armed conflict, which states that combatants can attack and kill opposing combatants so long as they are in active duty, are not sick or wounded, and have not surrendered. There's a whole long list of grievances that, if committed, are considered to be war crimes and are therefore a direct violation of the law of armed conflict. This list includes intentionally killing civilians or prisoners of war, torture of any kind, sexual violence of any kind, the destruction or stealing of civilian property, and genocide, all of which Nazi Germany committed. Mm-hmm. So now that I've already talked for 15 plus minutes about background, let's get into the Nuremberg Trials.
Lovely.
Adolf Hitler took his own life before it could be taken from him in April of 1945.
Coward. What?
Now, forgive me if I pronounce some of these Nazi German names incorrectly. I think this Nazi leader's name is pronounced Elon. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. I didn't mean that. It's Heinrich Himmler and Joseph Goebbels, prominent Nazis, also committed suicide. Therefore, they were never held accountable for their atrocities. But many of those beneath them were. Beginning as early as December of 1942, the Allied powers, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, issued the first joint declaration in which they acknowledged the mass murder of Jews in Europe and resolved to prosecute those responsible. The declaration stated in part that the Allied powers were aware that there was an extermination of Jewish people in Europe, that the conditions of these concentration camps were, quote, of appalling horror and brutality, unquote, and that the, quote, able-bodied are slowly worked to death in labor camps. The infirm are left to die of exposure and starvation or are deliberately massacred in mass executions. The number of victims of these bloody cruelties is reckoned in many hundreds of thousands of entirely innocent men, women, and children, unquote. I mention this declaration for a couple of reasons. The first is because this was a joint declaration by the Allied powers that they intended to one day hold to task the people responsible for such atrocities. But I mention it for one other disturbing reason, and that is that this statement was made in December of 1942, 1 year after the U.S. entered the World War and nearly 3 years before the first concentration camp would be liberated. I say this because people often wonder how much awareness Americans had about the atrocities being committed against the Jewish people of Europe, and this is proof that they knew about the Holocaust as it was being committed. Certainly, we know about the troops that liberated these camps being shocked by the state of the prisoners held there. I don't think anyone anticipated things were as bad as they truly were, but we did know that they were very, very bad. And instead of helping sooner, we made things harder for the Jewish people by implementing strict quotas on the number of Jewish refugees allowed to enter the United States. So here's where I'm going to share a story, and I don't think I'll cry while I'm saying it, but it just is one of the most harrowing and most memorable experiences of my entire life, 30 plus years of life. It was when I was at Dachau. I was there with a group of high school students. I was a chaperone on this trip. And the teacher, you know her, Leah, that leads these overseas trips that I went with, she's an English teacher. And so when a student looked at her with teary eyes as we stood in the middle of this horrifying place and asked her, did the United States know about this? The teacher turned to me, the history nerd, and said, Rachel, would you like to elaborate? And now I'm going to cry. Yeah. That really crushed me. Yeah. It's one of my biggest memories because I was explaining to a group of American high school students who had just stepped out of an abandoned gas chamber that Americans were not unaware of the horrors taking place in Europe during the Second World War. Yeah, I didn't think I was actually going to cry, but I did cry while I was telling them the story. But you know what I did after that? I told them about Lee Miller and how badass she is, or was. I had to like end it on kind of a high note about, but you know what is amazing? This American woman that was like taking pictures on the front lines where the men wouldn't, and she found Hitler's apartment after he had run away to his bunker, and she took pictures while she was in his bathtub, and like I did end it on that note. But this is definitely one of the most harrowing experiences of my life. Mm-hmm. All right. Anyway, with this declaration in December of 1942, the Allied powers were letting the Nazi regime know that they knew and that they would not be letting them get away with it. Each of the Allied powers had a different idea for how to exact this justice. The Soviet Union wanted to execute 50,000 to 100,000 German officers. Ooh. The United Kingdom likewise wanted a summary execution, essentially, execution without a fair trial of all of the high-ranking Nazis. The United States, however, proposed that we go through with a formal trial, stating that they believed that this process would be, quote, more effective, unquote. And I think overall would just have a greater impact on the general public if they were forced to hear directly from the mouths of these monsters the atrocities that they had inflicted upon innocent people.
Yeah.
In August of 1945, the Allied powers signed the London Agreement, which established the International Military Tribunal that would oversee these criminal trials. This agreement determined that the crimes the Nazis would be tried for would fall within 3 categories: crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And history.com does a really good job. I really like, if you want to dig into it more, they do such a great job talking about the Nuremberg trials and specifically breaking down just how unique and difficult this process here was. I mean, there was no precedent at this point for an international criminal trial on war crimes. You're bringing together multiple nations that all have different laws and practices and policies to try another nation for multiple crimes. It's super interesting and super complicated, and I'm just like fascinated by all the nuances.
Totally.
Speaking of nuances, there are so many nuances to this event in history that it's difficult to tell the story straightforward without any side tangents. But this is another really important side tangent that I want to at least note. At this London meeting where they decided on the scope and terms of the forthcoming Nuremberg trials, the United States in particular made clear that the crimes against humanity charge would be something that only this international court would have jurisdiction over, i.e. not allowing this jurisdiction to be over one's government. Because why would the United States in the 1940s be concerned about a governing body having jurisdiction to make charges about crimes against humanity, which is defined as, quote, murder, enslavement, or deportation of civilians or persecution on political, religious, or racial grounds, unquote. Essentially, the United States wanted to ensure that this international court that would be charging Nazi officials with crimes against humanity would not have jurisdiction to place the same charges on the United States in the midst of its Jim Crow segregation laws.
And Japanese internment.
And Japanese internment. Isn't this so insane? It's the hypocrisy is disgusting, is it not? We're like, hey, we really want to try this other nation for their crimes, but please don't look at us.
Yeah.
We're going to run the show overseas. Don't look at us on our soil.
Right.
Yeah, the Japanese internment. I didn't even mention that. 100%. All right, so back to Nuremberg. One of the major decisions to be made was, of course, where the trial would be held. It was decided that Nuremberg, Germany was the right place, as Nuremberg had once been the location of Nazi rallies in the party's early days. So it was like really symbolic of Nazism. It was now within an American occupation zone, and the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, the physical location where the trials took place, had a prison attached to it where the defendants were held. The Nuremberg trials began on November 20th, 1945, and initially tried 22 of the more prominent Nazis, but would then later try several other members of the Nazi Party, including physicians, judges, lawyers, and more. Each of the Allied powers had 2 judges from their respective countries, and these judges served on a panel that then made the final decision about the defendants' fates. Now, before I continue, I want to take a quick look at a picture from the Nuremberg trials. And I want to point out something that has become what I personally would consider synonymous with the Nuremberg trials. So let's check out that picture. If it stands out to you, cool. If it doesn't, all good, because maybe it's just me that it stands out to.
The only thing I can see is a guy that looks like Bill Murray with sunglasses sitting in the second row.
Hold on. I'm getting the picture pulled up on my end.
That's literally all I see.
Bill Murray. I'm looking for it.
Sunglasses.
That is Bill Murray's great-great-grandpa. Yeah. But not even great-great-grandpa.
No,
That's,
like
that's his grandpa.
Maybe grandpa? Yeah.
Well, I will say that has never stood out to me before. The thing that stands out to me anytime that I think about the Nuremberg trials, when my mind's eye gets a visual of the Nuremberg trials, I always think of the headphones. I don't know if you saw them,
Yes.
but I always get this image of these nasty Nazis in their headphones. Most pictures that I look at from the trials show these crusty Tales from the Crypt megalomaniacs with headphones on. And what's actually... I mean, am I wrong?
No. Crusty is a great descriptor.
Tales from the Crypt, megalomaniacs,
Bill
Bill Murray,
Murray.
all on point.
No, I love Bill Murray.
I'm sorry. I meant that's how they look.
Crusty is not untrue of Bill Murray, so...
Oh, God. And so these headphones, for me, they're synonymous with the Nuremberg trials. What's actually really neat is that the Nuremberg trials represented one of the first times that instantaneous translation technology was used.
That's so cool.
That is so cool, right? Like, there were a multitude of languages spoken by the people involved in these trials. We have German, French, Russian, English. And so it was important that everyone received the same information at the same time via these headsets that instantaneously translated the spoken word into their native language. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Of the Nazis brought to trial, every one of them entered a not guilty plea, with the exception of one Nazi who didn't enter a plea at all and another who was hospitalized and unable to attend the first few weeks of trial. And this right here is the crux and the most important thing to take away from the Nuremberg trials, because this is something that continues to transcend time with dangerous implications. The reason that every single Nazi pleaded not guilty was because, per their defense, they were simply following orders.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally known as the Nuremberg defense today, in which a person claims that they were strictly following the orders of their superior and should therefore not be individually held at fault for the crimes that they committed.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could talk at length about that and where the buck stops, or what's that phrase? Where the
Uh-huh. Yeah, where the buck stops or where you draw the line. Yeah. The Nuremberg trials, however, would prove that this was not the case. The Nuremberg trials said, no, if you commit a crime, you as an individual are responsible for your choice to commit that crime, regardless of whether you were given illegal orders by a superior. And while no crime is acceptable, I think it's one thing if your boss asks you to fudge some numbers to make it look like your department did better in Q1 2025 than you did in Q4 2024, because you're all just like trying to keep your jobs, right? And make it look like your department did really well. I mean, that's bad and illegal and should not be done. And if you choose to do it, you are still personally responsible for it, even if it was direction given to you by your boss. But that's not what we're talking about here.
right. We're saving spreadsheets, not lives.
Oh.
In that scenario, you know.
I love that. And you are so right. We are not talking about spreadsheets. We are not talking about saying that we made 1.5 million last quarter and 1.6 million in this quarter. We are talking about killing people.
Yes, human lives.
Human lives. Children.
Yep.
Babies clinging to their mothers as they're being thrown into gas chambers. Evidence of the Holocaust was provided in volumes at the Nuremberg trials. Photographs and videos were shown to evidence the atrocities the Nazis had committed. It is said that after an hour-long showing of a film created about the conditions of the concentration camps and the conditions of the people held there, the courtroom was just left in stunned silence.
Well, and I think the other thing, I mean, you brought this up earlier, is that like the American people were aware of it, the world were aware of it, but it's one thing, I think it's one thing to like know that something's happening far away and not necessarily affecting you directly. And another thing to see like film and photography of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that, I mean, obviously in this instance, and like once those photos and films came back, you know, showing the American people that, I think that it's impossible to not be stunned silent. You know what I mean? Like, I think, not to excuse overlooking what we knew was happening, but it's one thing to hear something and it's another thing to see it for your own eyes. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. And the analogy that comes to my mind is a much simpler one, but it's something that you and I have talked about since becoming moms. Is, you know, that becoming a mom is a life-changing experience and it's difficult while also beautiful. But until you've gone through it, you don't know. And there's that thing that goes around on social media a lot, right? Like, had I known, I would have reached out more often, or I would have
brought you a casserole. I would have.
You don't, and I don't hold any because you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And so that's a much simpler and lighter example, but I think that's true of every experience in life. You can be told and know that something is difficult and hard and there's some stuff going on until you experience it, which that experience may simply be looking at it with your own eyes. It's different.
Totally.
In addition to photographs and videos, there were also tens of thousands of records provided to prove the Nazis' intent on killing the entire Jewish race. Despite the fact that many records had either been destroyed by the Nazis before trial or had been inadvertently destroyed by the Allies during the course of the war, there was one document in particular that would settle things once and for all. This document provided at court was called the Wannsee Conference Protocol. This is the document in which top Nazi officials laid out the final solution, the plan to mass murder 11 million Jews in Europe. Amazingly, much of the proof of the Holocaust came from the mouths of top Nazi officials themselves. A number of them took the stand in their defense, telling people from their own mouths in very cold and nonchalant terms how they had systematically exacted the murder of millions upon millions of Jews. And the reason they felt so comfortable providing such heinous information was, once again, the Nuremberg defense, in which they did not feel that they could be individually held at fault if they were simply following the orders of their superiors.
Mhm.
Sadly, much of this information provided at trial, the photographs, the videos, the documents, and the testimony, are what are still being used to this day to combat modern day Holocaust deniers. By the end of the initial trial, all but 3 defendants were found guilty. It was determined that the court had not provided proof beyond a reasonable doubt that those 3 had been involved in the crimes. Of those convicted, 12 were sentenced to death, while the remainder were given prison sentences that were anywhere between 10 years and life. Hermann Goering, a very prominent Nazi, killed himself the night before his execution by taking a cyanide pill that he had hidden in his belongings. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, the Nuremberg trials started with just these 20-something defendants, but would later extend to others that had complied with illegal Nazi orders, such as physicians and lawyers and so on. These additional trials were conducted at the Nuremberg Palace, just as the first had, but these trials would be conducted solely by United States military tribunals due to ongoing disagreements between the Allied powers. Of the individuals tried at these trials, 185 would be indicted, 12 received death sentences, 8 received life in prison sentences, and another 77 received shorter prison sentences. There is so very much to say that it really can only be written in a book to capture it all. So to sum it up, the Nuremberg trials changed history. They were ultimately considered a success and a good precedent for international trials and international law and holding people accountable for their individual atrocities, regardless of who told them to inflict the crimes. The Nuremberg trials were and continue to, of course, be met with cynicism and controversy. It was felt by many that these trials were meant to extend shame on Germany as a whole rather than strictly on the individuals that committed the crimes. And to that, I kind of have my own feelings. I saw you kind of shake your head too. I am totally open to your feelings and the feelings of our other American listeners. In fact, I'm eager to hear what you think. But I just know that for me, at this time in our American history, I'm drawing some relevance here. I'm ashamed of our entire nation. And I think that we deserve the shame. Did I vote for this administration? No. But am I American? Yes. And to the outside eye, I am a part of the problem. And I'm actually, surprisingly, maybe, I'm okay with accepting that. When I see things on Instagram about how Europeans are sad for Americans because we were all dumb enough to let a dictator become our leader, I accept that. I don't fight it. I think, yeah, you're right. We as a nation are dumb. But I also can't accept that people are offended by that accusation, that if you're not directly a part of the problem, if you didn't vote for this administration, if you do not serve this administration, you shouldn't be lumped into the greater problem. So here's where I'm like so open to your thoughts. And if they differ from mine, I'm totally open to that too. It's such a complicated conversation.
Yeah, and I know that there were other things happening, laws being applied, and I can't think of the term, but laws being applied to Germany and things that were holding the entire country accountable. But specifically when it comes to these trials, I don't think holding people high in power in the Nazi regime is holding all German people accountable for World War II. That's and I think that saying that is a little silly. Like I could understand how Germans might feel like that, but I mean, these trials were literally holding 100 and what did you say, 100 and something people accountable. There's a lot more people than that in Germany. Yeah. And so it's obviously just holding these people accountable for their crimes. And to take that personally is your problem.
No, I actually think that is like a really amazing perspective, because that is something I've been kind of going through right now. I remember when it was clear on election night that Trump had been elected once again to office, the first thing I just sobbed. And the first thing I said was, I'm so ashamed, because my thought was just like, I am so ashamed of
Mm-hmm.
us as a country
Mm-hmm.
and the way that other countries are going to look at us.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think other countries do look at us with like, you all are dummies,
Raised eyebrows, yeah, for sure.
raised eyebrows. But I also do think, and this goes exactly to what you were just saying, is like when you're the outsider, because I have a couple friends that live in Europe. Every time I talk to them, they tell me like everyone I talk to feels sad and sorry for the
Yeah,
US because they
yeah.
know that it's a faction of people that voted for this administration, and they feel sad and sorry for the rest of you that you are having to go through this experience together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually think what you said is perfect for the moment, is that Germans felt this shame cast upon all of them, even if other countries didn't mean it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel right now, is shame on me, shame on our entire country, when actually at least my two European friends say otherwise.
Yeah. And it's something that just recently happened again. We're recording this in March of
Mm.
2025,
Mm-hmm.
is the tariff situation with Canada that we're going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something, I don't remember who it was. It wasn't Trudeau. It was another leader from
Mm-hmm.
Canada said like, we do not hold the American people
Yeah.
accountable for what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
It is leadership. It is high level, high
Yeah.
people in government that we're contending with right now.
Yeah.
And every, American citizens, this is not,
Yeah.
we're not fighting with you.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that so interesting? Like human psychology, that you just assume
everyone blames you personally.
everyone hates me. Yeah. Personally. Yeah. And it just goes to that, like, this is how humans are built and made, that in post World War II, your average German felt shame.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you are accusing me of the same things you were accusing the Nazi officials in the Nuremberg trials,
Yeah.
when that wasn't the case. And it's not the case now with America either.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing with the Nuremberg trials is that it was because of the US's like ongoing, keep adding more and more people to the
Mm.
slate. It
Hmm.
probably felt like this is never going to end, right? It went
Yeah.
for like what 3 years, and so I get that it's just kind of like, oh my God, can we just move on?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
just move on? But again, I think what we've just talked about still stands in that, holding a small percentage or a small group of people accountable for their specific crimes is not necessarily, they don't represent necessarily
Yeah.
their people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good lesson for all of us. I mean, as always, that we are harder on ourselves than other people actually are.
Yeah.
And most of the time, people are not assuming bad of you.
Yeah.
Despite controversy, the Nuremberg trials set necessary precedent that allowed for the Tokyo war crimes trials that took place from 1946 to 1948. It set precedent for the 1961 trial of Nazi leader Adolf Eichmann, who technically should have been tried during the Nuremberg trials but had fled. It also established tribunals for the Rwandan genocide.
I was just going to mention Rwanda. Yep.
And finally, it led to the formation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Genocide Convention, and the Geneva Convention.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we know there were many more Nazis that should have been tried during the Nuremberg trials, but like Eichmann, had fled before they could be held accountable, many of which fled to the United States. It is reported that up to 10,000 Nazi war criminals came to the United States following the Second World War. We also know that some of these Nazis would end up obtaining high-level positions within the United States government. We covered this all the way back in episode 13. Can you believe it was that early on?
No.
Yeah, I know, me neither. That was many houses ago, jobs ago, babies ago. We covered in our episode 13 about Operation Paperclip, about how the U.S. government paid for nearly 2,000 Germans, some of which had been leaders in the Nazi Party, to come to the United States to work on top secret projects. We also have our episode 45, where we talked about John Demjanjuk, a naturalized American citizen who was later found to have been one of the Nazi leaders at the Treblinka extermination camp. It's amazing to me that without intentionally doing so, we have at minimum 2 episodes about post World War II life for Nazis that arguably should have been tried at the Nuremberg Trials and were not. That makes me feel 2 different kinds of ways. Number one, that like, wow, we are really kicking butt with how many topics we've covered, that we have 2 previous episodes we can easily direct listeners to should they want to do some follow-up research to this week's episode. But then, of course, the immediate second thought is that neither of those episodes should have ever existed, because neither of these things should have ever happened. But I digress. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Hashtag History.
We will share the picture that we discussed on the episode of crusty Germans to our Instagram.
Rusty Bill Murray.
And also,
No, like allegedly.
You know, who knows? And all sources used to put together the episode can be found on our website at hashtaghistory-pod.com.
A special thank you to my husband, Alex, for editing the podcast. Thank you so much. You're the best.
Angel.
Subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you use. Share about us with your family and friends, and then give us a rate and review.
And be sure to check us out on Instagram. We are at #history_podcast.
And come join us over on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can help support our books and booze supply. This is really a place where you could just support the podcast, and in exchange for your support, you will receive an automatic 15% off all merchandise, and we mail you cards and stickers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.